Some men take their revenge with a raised voice. I take mine with a closed door. And if you've never watched a patient man finally stop being patient, let me tell you something, it's quieter than you'd expect, and it costs a whole lot more than the thing that got stolen. Right now, I'm standing at Gate C-22 in Denver International, watching a security officer walk my son through a line of strangers with his hands zip-tied in front of him. His roommate's girlfriend filming the whole thing on her phone like it's the best content she's shot all year. I want you to understand something before I tell you how we got here. I didn't put those restraints on him. He did that to himself, one lie at a time, for almost 3 years. All I did was stop covering for him. 4 years, Ethan. 4 years I bailed water out of a boat you kept putting holes in, and somewhere along the way, you decided I'd just keep bailing forever. The gate agent's voice crackles something about a delayed departure. Nobody's listening. Everybody in that terminal is watching my son instead, watching the color drain out of his face, watching his friend Colton back up slowly like proximity might be contagious. One of the officers reads him something about interstate transport of stolen property. My son turns his head and finds me in the crowd, and for 1 second, just one, he looks about 9 years old again. Then the moment passes, and I just watch. I don't move toward him. I don't say a word. Welcome to the channel, folks. If this is your first time here, grab a coffee and settle in, because these stories are true, and the people in them always had a way out. They just didn't take it. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what state you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Let me back this up, though, because you need the whole picture, and trust me, it's not what you think. 4 days before that airport, I got home from the shop a little after 6. I've run a small auto body place outside Wichita for going on 31 years now. Garrison Collision. My name's still on the sign, even though my knees complain about it these days. Same 2011 Ford pickup I drove into this driveway a decade ago. Mud flaps rattling. Smells like Bondo and coffee no matter how many times I wash it. I pulled up to the house on Larkspur Lane. Built it myself, more or less, back when I was 30. And figured a family fills a house up naturally, the way water finds a level. Mine didn't stay full. The house did. It's quiet in there most days now. Ethan's technically living 40 minutes away in an apartment near the community college, technically still enrolled, though I've stopped asking what technically means anymore because I don't like the answer. I have a habit I've never told anyone about, not even my sister. Most evenings, after I lock up the shop, I go into the room that used to be ours, and I sit on the edge of the bed, and I open the cedar box on top of the dresser, and I look at my late wife's wedding ring. I don't always take it out. Sometimes I just crack the lid, let the last bit of daylight catch the little diamond, and for about 30 seconds, Carol's still in the kitchen humming to the radio, still telling me to take my boots off at the door. That Tuesday, I opened the box, and it was too light. You know that feeling, the one where your stomach knows something's wrong a full second before your brain catches up? I stood there staring into blue velvet where a ring should have been sitting. My late wife's wedding band, the one her mother wore before her, the one Carol never took off in 26 years of marriage except to wash dishes. And even then it sat on the windowsill above the sink where she could see it. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt like somebody had reached a hand straight through my ribs and pulled something out. Quiet as a pickpocket. I checked the closet. I checked the fireproof box in the garage. I checked every drawer in that dresser twice, even though some part of me already knew exactly where that ring had gone and exactly whose fingerprints were on it. There's only one other person with a key to my house. I called him. It rang 3 times. When he picked up, I could hear noise behind him laughing, somebody yelling about a cornhole tournament, music too loud for a Tuesday afternoon. Hey, Pop. Kind of a bad time. Ethan, where's your mother's ring? Silence. Just a beat too long. Then, too fast, too smooth. What ring? The wedding band. Cedar box, top of the dresser. It's gone. I heard somebody laugh at something in the background, completely unbothered, like my whole world hadn't just tilted sideways on its axis. Then his voice went flat, that register he uses when he's decided I'm the unreasonable one. Okay, look, it's just a ring, Dad. Relax. Just a ring. Mom's gone. She doesn't need it. I needed help, and you wouldn't help me, so I found a way. Don't make this into something it's not. You found a way, I repeated slow, like I was translating a language I didn't speak anymore. Ethan, did you sell it? I gotta go. We're boarding for the lake in a minute. I'll call you when I'm back. The line went dead. I stood in my own kitchen holding a phone that had gone silent, and I want you to understand something. I have never in my life heard a silence that loud. He didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. 6 years old, this boy cried for 2 days straight because he lost a plastic dinosaur at the county fair. And now, 23 years old, he sold his dead mother's wedding ring and talked about it like he'd returned a rental car a day late. I want to tell you this came out of nowhere. It didn't. Nothing like this ever does. It happened the way a roof leaks. You don't notice the water stain until the ceiling's already rotten underneath. Let me take you back to where it actually started. Carol passed when Ethan was 19. Pancreatic cancer. 7 months start to finish. I won't dwell on that part. Some of you already know that particular grief, and you don't need me to walk you through it. Some of you don't, and I hope you never do. What I'll tell you instead is what it did to my boy and what it did to me, because those two things ended up on a collision course, and it took me most of 4 years to see it coming. Ethan turned his grief into anger, and the anger needed somewhere to land, and I was the only person left standing close enough. Everything became my fault somehow. The diagnosis, the treatments, the fact that his mother wasn't there to see him graduate. I turned my grief inward and swallowed every bit of it, because I was terrified that if I made him sit with one single consequence, I'd lose the only piece of family I had left in this world. So I didn't push. Not once. Not for 4 years. 19 years old, he took my old Silverado to a party I didn't know about and put it into a guardrail on the way home. Nobody hurt, thank God, though the truck never drove straight again after that. Said, a deer ran out in front of him. There wasn't a scratch of deer hair anywhere near that guardrail. I paid the $2,200 out of my own account and never once asked him for a dime back. Told myself he was just young, just careless, the way boys are careless. When he started at the community college, he called me from his dorm crying, said the whole place felt wrong, said he needed a fresh start somewhere else. I'd already put almost $11,000 into that first year, plus first and last month on an apartment he barely slept in. I swallowed it. Told myself he was just grieving, just finding his feet. He never once called me on Father's Day, not one single year since we buried her. I always called him on his birthday. I always sent money 100 here, 200 there, just for gas, just because. Never asked where it actually went. Most nights I'd cook something simple after a 10-hour shift at the shop, and on the rare nights he'd actually come by. He'd sit across the table, scrolling his phone through the whole meal. I'd ask about his week. One-word answers. I'd tell him I loved him before he left. Yep, you too, he'd say. Just that. And I'd tell myself, at least he's still coming around. At least I still have him. Here's what I understand now, sitting here telling you this, that I didn't understand then. I thought I was being patient. I thought I was being the bigger man, the father who wouldn't abandon his kid after life had already taken so much from him. But I wasn't being patient. I was being a doormat, and he knew it. He knew I'd never say no. He knew I'd never make him sit inside a consequence long enough for it to actually teach him anything. So, somewhere along the way, without either one of us really marking the moment it happened, I stopped being his father in his eyes. I became a line item, a source of funds he never had to say thank you for. Not a man who'd buried a wife and was doing his level best not to drown. The first time I ever told him no, the real first time, 4 years running, was 9 days before that ring went missing. He'd called asking for $3,200. A lake house up near Table Rock, with 4 buddies from his old dorm floor. Colton and a couple guys named Marcus and Dade I'd met maybe once between them. I did the math in my head while he talked. $3,200. My property tax bill, that quarter, was $2,800. I can't swing it this time, son, I told him. Business has been slow since spring, and I've got the tax bill due. The reaction came instantly. Are you serious right now? You're always broke when it's something I want. I'm serious. I wish I could make it work. You're unbelievable. You know that? You act like you're broke, but you never say no to yourself. You just don't want me to have a life. Ethan, that's not fair. He hung up before I got the sentence out. Didn't call the next day either. I figured that was the end of it, figured he'd cool down the way he always did and act like nothing happened inside a week or two. I had no idea he was already sitting in his apartment, with his mother's wedding ring in his palm, searching pawn shops on his phone. I had no idea that within 3 days I'd be standing in a shop off Kellogg Avenue, staring through smudged glass at the one thing on this earth I still had of my wife. And I had no idea that this time, for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't going to swallow it. Something in me had gone still. Not angry, not yet. Still, the way a pot goes still right before it starts to roll. I hung up my own phone, set it on the counter, and stood in that quiet kitchen a long while. Then I grabbed my keys. 9 miles from my house to that stretch of Kellogg where every third storefront is a payday loan office or a pawn counter. I drove it in dead silence, no radio, just the rattle of an old truck engine and my own pulse in my ears. You'd think a man on his way to confirm something like this would have 100 thoughts running at once. I didn't. My mind had gone somewhere strange and calm, the kind of calm you hear about right before weather turns. I thought about Carol. I thought about the night I proposed on the tailgate of my first truck, out past the reservoir, sweating clean through my shirt. That little ring box shaking worse in my hand than it had shaken 3 days earlier at that dresser. I thought about the morning of her diagnosis, how she squeezed my hand in that waiting room and said, "Well, at least we've still got each other," like she was the one comforting me, and not the other way around. I thought about the promise I made her, unspoken, the day we buried her, that I'd hold what was left of this family together, that I'd raise our son right, even without her here to help me do it. Some promises you keep by giving everything you've got. Some, I was about to learn, you keep by finally taking something back. The shop was called Cap City Loan and Jewelry. Bars on the windows, one flickering fluorescent tube overhead. Man behind the counter introduced himself as Wade. I walked the length of that glass case and stopped dead. There it was, Carol's ring sitting under ugly light next to a row of pawned guitars and a stack of old coin collections. "Help you find something?" Wade asked. "That wedding band," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Where'd it come from?" Young fella brought it in Sunday morning. Said it was his grandmother's. Needed cash before a trip. Gave him $350 for it. $350. A custom band I'd had sized and set back in 1998. Months of overtime folded into it. Traded for gas money and a weekend at a lake. "That's my late wife's ring," I said. "My son took it out of my house." Wade's face tightened right up. He pulled the intake log and a photocopy of Ethan's driver's license without me even asking. "Look, man," he showed valid ID, signed the ownership form himself. "I can hold it in the safe. I don't want to be the guy who profits off something like this. But under Kansas law, if it's stolen property, I've got to report it. You'll need proof of ownership before I can release anything." "I've got the original appraisal and the receipt," I told him. "Home safe." "Bring it," Wade said. "I'll call it in." I drove back 40 minutes later with the paperwork in hand. The detective who showed up gave his name as Marcus Whitfield, 50s, tired around the eyes, the kind of cop who's heard every version of every family falling apart and somehow still sounds like he means it when he asks how you're holding up. He took my statement standing right at that counter, matched the appraisal against the ring in Wade's hand, filled out an evidence hold. Then he set his pen down, folded his hands, and asked me the question I'd been too much of a coward to ask myself. "Mr. Garrison, I need you to really think about this before you answer. This is theft, and pawn fraud too, since he used the intake form under false pretenses. Combined value puts it over the felony line, not a slap on the wrist. A felony on a 23-year-old's record. You sure this is what you want? Because once I put in a warrant, there's no calling it back." He studied me a second, then nodded slow, like a man who'd watched this exact decision get made maybe a handful of times in his whole career, and it never got any easier to witness. "All right," he said. "You said he's traveling this weekend?" "Flying to Denver Friday. Lake trip with some friends. Comes back Sunday. We'll have somebody waiting at the gate." He looked at me, the way you look at a man doing something you're not sure is right, like I might be the villain in this particular version of the story, the father who's supposed to shield his boy from the world, no matter what that boy does to deserve otherwise. But here's what nobody standing in that pawn shop understood. I'd been shielding him for 4 straight years, and every bit of that shielding had built me a son who genuinely believed consequences were something that happened to other families. I wasn't there to punish him. I was there because I'd finally understood that sometimes the only way left to save somebody is to stop catching them. Wade held the ring in a little manila envelope while the paperwork finished. When Detective Whitfield handed it back to me, I held it a second before slipping it into my shirt pocket, right over my heart, the same pocket I'd carried her rosary in the day we buried her. I drove home with the window cracked, that early June air finally smelling like it had shaken off spring for good. Somewhere on I-35, I did something I'm not proud of, and I'm also not sorry for. I pulled my phone out at a red light and opened Instagram. There he was, dock chair, lake water behind him blue as anything, a can of something in a foam sleeve. Caption: needed this so bad, best weekend of the year. Next post, 20 minutes newer, him and Colton and the other two, arms slung around each other's shoulders, laughing at something off camera, golden light hitting all 4 of them like a beer commercial. While I drove home with his dead mother's ring riding in my shirt pocket, my son was 300 miles away, posting about the best weekend of the year, with money he'd made breaking mine. And here's the part that unsettled me a little. I didn't feel a shred of guilt looking at it. I felt something closer to relief, like I'd been carrying a hot coal in my bare hand for 4 years, telling myself the burn wasn't so bad, and I'd finally let it drop. I got home a little after 7. House was quiet, same as it's been for 4 years now. I went upstairs, set the cedar box back exactly where it belonged on the dresser, and closed the lid slow. The way you close a door on a room you don't plan on going back into for a while. Then I went down, made myself a plate, sat at the kitchen table alone. Friday, 4 days out, he lands in Denver thinking he pulled it off clean. He has no idea what's waiting for him at the gate. I picked up my fork. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't the one absorbing the hit. I was the one who'd finally decided to stop swallowing it. If you've stuck with me this far, drop where you're tuning in from down in the comments. Hit that like button while you're at it, and stay with me, the hardest part's still ahead. Friday came slow, the kind of slow where every hour drags its own feet on purpose. Around 4 that afternoon, Detective Whitfield sent a text. Flight lands 5:15. We'll be at the gate. I didn't drive out there to gloat. I didn't go to yell. Some of you might figure I should have stayed home and let the officers handle it quiet, out of sight. But I needed to stand in that terminal and prove something to myself, that when he looked for me to catch him this time, I wasn't going to step in front of that train again. I stood near a support column outside security, hands in my jacket pockets, watching the arrivals board flip his flight to landed. A little after 5:30, I spotted him, sunglasses pushed up into hair that looked freshly cut, laughing at something Colton said, duffel bag over one shoulder, looking completely, uncomplicatedly pleased with himself. 2 officers, in plain clothes, stepped away from the wall near the gate. Ethan Garrison. Yeah? Still smiling, still not understanding. You're under arrest for theft and pawn fraud by deception. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. The change on his face happened all at once. Shock, then confusion, then something closer to real fear. Colton's girlfriend screamed and fumbled her phone up to film it. Colton just stood there frozen, mouth open, and as the zip ties clicked around Ethan's wrists, he found me through the crowd, and his voice cracked wide open. Dad, tell them this is a mistake, Dad, please. I didn't move. I didn't say one word. I just stood against that column with my hands in my pockets and watched them walk him through the terminal doors. I watched it twice. Then I turned my phone face down on the seat beside me, drove home, and sat in my quiet kitchen letting myself feel whatever it was I was going to feel. It wasn't joy. I want to be honest with you about that. There wasn't one piece of me that felt good watching my son get walked through an airport in restraints while strangers filmed it for clicks. But there was a small, tired, 4 years, worn-down piece of me that finally exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since the day we buried his mother, and I could put it down at last. He called that night. County holding, 1 call allowed, and of course it was to me. I almost let it ring out. Watched the screen light up with his contact photo, a picture from 3 Christmases back, when he still smiled at me like he meant it. I picked up on the fourth ring. Dad! His voice cracked instantly. Dad, oh my God, you have to come get me. They're saying it's a felony. Tell them you gave me the ring. Tell them it was a gift. I can't do that, Ethan. A beat of silence, then sharper. What do you mean you can't? I'm your son. You're right, I said. You are my son. And I have failed you. I heard his breath catch, like he thought this was the part where I always softened. For 4 years, I told him, I let you treat me like an ATM with a pulse. I let you take from me and never once asked for anything back. I let you disrespect your mother's memory, and I told myself I was being a good father by staying quiet about it. I wasn't. I was being a coward. I was so scared of losing you that I forgot to actually raise you. Dad, please, you don't understand. If this stays on my record, I lose the internship. I lose everything. I'm not bailing you out. My voice didn't shake. 4 years of swallowing everything, and in that one moment, it didn't shake at all. I'm not hiring you a lawyer either. You're going to sit in that cell and think about what you did, and when you get out, you're going to face whatever comes next on your own. You're a monster. He was sobbing now, ugly and raw. You're supposed to protect me. No, Ethan, I'm a father who finally loves you enough to let you fail. I hung up. Sat there a long while afterward, just staring at the phone. Thought about Carol, thought about what she'd say if she could see this. I knew she'd be heartbroken, but I knew she'd understand too, because she was the one who taught me, long before any of this, that love, without a spine to it, isn't love. It's just enabling, wearing a nicer name. I had loved our boy into becoming someone his own mother wouldn't recognize. That night, for the first time in 4 years, I slept clean through until morning. The consequences piled up fast, once a man finally stopped standing in front of them. Ethan spent 2 nights in county before a judge set bail, which his roommate's older brother ended up covering somebody I'd never even met. By the time he got out, the felony charge was sitting on his record for good, not going anywhere. Word travels fast in a town our size, and a local boy getting walked out of an airport for pawning his dead mother's ring is exactly the kind of story that makes the rounds. The community college quietly pulled the internship he'd been counting on for the fall. Not the right fit going forward, which is polite corporate language, for we saw the video too. Colton stopped answering his texts inside a week. Marcus and Dade went quiet not long after. A girl he'd been seeing, Paige, who'd been out at that lake with the rest of them, posted one vague story about toxic energy and blocked him before the month was out. All of them gone, fast as they'd arrived. The same silence he'd handed me for 4 straight years, finally landing back on him for the first time in his life. He spent those 2 nights in a holding cell with nothing but his own thoughts for company. No phone, no friends, no filtered photos of somebody else's better weekend. And when he finally walked back out into daylight, he had precisely what he'd wanted for 4 years running. No father telling him what to do, no rules, no expectations weighing him down. He just hadn't figured out yet what all that actually costs a person. In the weeks that followed, I did the work I should have done a long time ago. Called his landlord, paid out the early lease termination, turned in the keys myself, pulled my name off the credit card he'd been running up for 2 years. Canceled the phone line I'd been paying for since he was 17. The bleeding that had been draining me dry for 4 years finally, quietly, stopped. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, he showed up at the house. I saw him coming up the driveway through the front window, wearing the same faded jacket he'd worn to his mother's funeral. He walked up and tried his key in the lock. I watched his face when the deadbolt didn't turn, because I'd changed it that Monday. He knocked. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch instead of letting him in. Beside me sat one duffel bag, zipped shut. "What is this?" His voice was already trembling. "Your things. All of them." "No." His face just crumpled. "Dad, I have nowhere to go. I've got nothing left." This is the part where the old version of me would have broken, where I'd have said, "Come on inside. Let's talk this through. I'll always be here for you no matter what." I said some version of that sentence for 4 straight years. And every single time I said it, I taught him a little more, that nothing he did would ever actually cost him a thing. "Not this time. You've got exactly what you wanted," I told him. "Freedom. No father telling you what to do, no rules, no expectations. Isn't that what you called me controlling? Well, nobody's controlling you anymore. That's not fair. Fair, I said, keeping my voice level. Is you selling your mother's wedding ring for $350 in a weekend at a lake and calling it just a ring when I asked you where it went? Well, this is just a house. Go build your own. He stood there on that porch a long moment, mouth working like he was waiting for me to take it back. I'd taken it back for 4 years running. Every ultimatum, I mean it this time, every line I drew that washed out the second he cried hard enough. I didn't take it back. I picked that duffel bag up off the porch boards and set it down in front of his feet. Then I stepped back inside, closed the door, and turned the deadbolt. I didn't watch him walk away. I didn't need to. I'd spent 4 years watching him walk all over me. Figured I'd earned the right to skip this particular part. That evening I made myself a real dinner, not leftovers standing at the counter. Grilled a couple of bratwurst out on the back patio, the kind Carol used to pick up from the butcher counter every Labor Day. Sat out there and ate slow, listened to the neighborhood wind down somebody's sprinkler ticking 2 yards over, a screen door slapping shut somewhere down the block. Afterward, I went upstairs, took the cedar box off the dresser, sat on the edge of the bed and held it the way I used to. Before any of this, before a stolen ring and a pawn shop counter and an airport full of strangers filming my son's worst day, I opened the lid. The little diamond caught the last of the evening light through the window, same as it always had. I spent 4 years trying to hold onto a son who didn't want to be held the way I was holding him. Told myself if I just gave him everything, every excuse, every dollar, every second chance, he'd stay close. He'd love me back the way I'd loved him. But he didn't stay close. He just took. And when he finally took the one thing in that house I couldn't replace, I finally understood something I should have understood a long time before that. Love without a spine to it isn't love. It's hostage-taking, wearing a kinder word. And I was done being the hostage. I closed the box gentle, set it back on the dresser. I didn't feel angry sitting there. Didn't feel triumphant either. This was never about winning anything. I just felt quiet. Still, the kind of still you only get once you finally set down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you forgot it even had weight to it. It's been 3 months now. He wrote me a letter about 6 weeks back. No ask in it. No excuses. Just an apology and an address where he's been staying with a coworker from the warehouse job he picked up. I haven't answered it yet. I'm not sure when I will. But I kept it, tucked in the top drawer of that same dresser, right next to the cedar box. Some doors you close because you have to. Some you just leave unlocked, in case somebody on the other side finally decides to walk back through the right way, on their own 2 feet, asking for nothing but a second chance to earn it. He sold his mother's ring for a weekend at a lake. He got a felony record, a handful of friends who vanished, the second things got hard, and a father who finally stopped catching him. I got my life back, and something I didn't expect to get a little bit of hope, still sitting folded up in a drawer, waiting to see what he does with it next. If this one hit home for you, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and tell me down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one of them.